Welcome to Previously on X-Men, the podcast that looks at X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. I'm Hilary, and I've got Nick with me today.
Hey there, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Today, we are doing sort of comic. We're doing a manga of X-Men Misfits.
Yeah. Forgotten line of X-Men Marvel mangas here that just sort of hit the scene and then vanished.
Yeah. This is a weird one for me because it's not Japanese. It's just like in the style of a manga?
Yeah, it was done by Del Rey, and Del Rey for a long time had like the Star Wars license and stuff like that. So they had like a Del Rey manga line that went for a while, but no more. It doesn't even exist as an imprint anymore, so it's gone.
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about Volume 1. This was written by Raina Telgemeier, and you know a lot about that from your librarian side.
I do. Actually, Eric and I went to a pop culture conference in Long Island for the library years ago, and it was sort of in between X-Men Misfits and some of her other stuff that hit really big, so she was like on the come up. So we sat through her panels and things and got books signed for the library from her and everything afterwards. And it was like, this came out in 2009, and then she did one called Sisters, one called Smiles, and then there was like Ghosts and Drama and all these other ones. All of them have been like huge bestsellers and like really big stuff, but probably 5 or 6 years after X-Men Misfits came out.
Okay. That helps a little bit because going into this, I've never read a Raina Telgemeier, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
But I know her reputation.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of like, oh, I don't know if I want to read an X-Men manga. Oh, but it's Raina Telgemeier.
Yeah.
I bet it'll be good. And
Yeah.
without getting too much into it, I was a little
Early days.
dismayed.
Yes.
But anyway, so it's her, Raina Telgemeier, and
Yes.
Dave Roman.
Yes, and I think they worked on, there was a couple of these Marvel mangas, and I think they kind of created this line together with the intention, of course, that it would continue on.
But this is the only one.
It is the only one, and it's one of those weird things where, like, even within the printed book itself, there's a lot of tease about Volume 2, there's a preview of Volume 2, all the artists, like, the artist is like, hey, see you in Volume 2.
Yeah.
There was pre-order listings, like, you could have placed an order on this, and then they just canceled it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if there were reasons other than that it's not great.
Well, it's not just this, though. There was another one that was like, it was a Wolverine thing, because of course it was, called, I think, Prodigal Son. And it was the same thing. It was like one volume and boom,
I feel like
they
maybe
were
I
done.
read that.
Oh, really?
But I don't really remember it.
Yeah, it looked familiar to me, too, but I don't really remember reading it. It would have been 2009 or so when that came out. So, yeah. I don't know. I read a few things about it that said, you know, like the sales were decent, but like the cost of the added cost of the Marvel license and everything made it not viable. I don't know. Really weird course correction, though, to never do anything else with it.
So it came out in 2009.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you have off the top of your head, like, what that is in relation to the meteoric rise of Marvel in our culture?
Well, Iron Man would have just come out in 2008.
Okay.
But, you know, the X-Men movies are happening at that time, so it makes sense.
I guess I just sort of would wonder if that would play a role in kind of shifting to another tack, just because it's like we're gonna do this thing over here, this MCU situation.
It's possible. It's possible.
I don't know. Anywho, so the art. Did I say the art?
No, you didn't.
The art is by Anzu.
What did you think of the art?
I thought it was. I mean, it's good. It's shoujo style manga, which is very like, it's focused on sort of a young girl audience.
Okay.
This is the genre that has like lots of romance, lots of like things with a whole bunch of girls and one guy, or a whole bunch of guys and one girl.
I see. It felt very true. I mean, I haven't read the kind of manga that you've read. Like, I'm not an expert as you are, but like this, to me, even from my limited experience, felt very tropey.
Incredibly tropey.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I've had trouble with a lot. Every time I try to read like I read that Star Wars manga, anything that's like a manga version of a franchise, like the Marvel Universe, like Star Wars and things like that. And what always trips me up is those tropes, because they're there in like genuine manga.
Yeah.
But there's something about the way they tend to put franchise material into those tropes that really make them stand out, and it's really hard to kind of take them seriously.
Yeah.
And that happened
I
a
get
lot
that.
in this
I
one.
get that.
Because
Yeah.
it was just, as I was reading, I was just like, oh, here comes this guy. Oh no. Like it was just.
You even have the fire and ice thing happening with Pyro and Iceman. So like you even have that sort of
which is
opposites.
all just bananas. Because, okay.
Let's
We'll talk about the plot.
Okay, it
We'll
was a
talk about the
bestseller.
plot.
It was a genuine bestseller
Well,
on the New York Times bestseller list for
X-Men's
multiple
great.
weeks. Yeah.
Manga's great.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I guess I just don't really. I don't understand why it's not Japanese. Like, it's just weird
Yeah.
to have. This is like a thing that happens,
Yeah.
obviously. It's just become a style, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know why you would read a non-Japanese manga.
Yeah, there was a time when it was sort of like trying to get, like, remember James Patterson had that Maximum Ride series.
Yeah, I tried that too,
Yeah.
and it didn't really work.
Okay, well, that's the same kind of thing, though. They turned it into a graphic novel, but they clearly wanted it to look like a manga.
I don't know if
And that
you're
didn't really
aware,
last. Yeah.
but Japan
Okay.
has a very different culture
Oh.
than America.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like,
sense.
incredibly different.
Sure.
So I feel like there's just something inherent to the cultural translation
Yeah.
that, like, you just can't. There are things, I don't know.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like a subtle thing or something,
Yeah.
but I think that it comes through when an American is like, I'm going to do the Japan-y kinds of things, rather than a Japanese person just like
Yeah.
writing their story.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it tends not to work for me.
Yeah. So I had read this a long time ago, and I reread it when you asked me to do this, and my opinion changed a little bit based on like my original reading of it, because it is. I mean, there's something too about going into it, because the first time I didn't realize that it was just gonna end abruptly. I thought that it was like a standalone story, and so I was.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't even realize that there wasn't a volume 2. I just read it because it looked interesting, and because I knew Raina Telgemeier. I'd read Ghosts, I think, was the one of hers that I read, and I was like, okay, let's do it, X-Men. And I don't know. We can get into it, but it's strange to me just how much it is a volume 1.
Yeah.
Like right from like
It
right
feels
on the
like
cover.
a prologue.
Right on
they
the
don't
cover.
even. There's like no plot
Yeah.
in this book.
This is the thing I don't understand, and I still haven't gotten over the Batgirl movie being canceled, but like this is the thing I don't understand. Where like I know it exists. I know that volume 2 is written like
Is it? Do you think?
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah, because it was so close to publication. I feel like it was just short of printing is what it seems like to me, and they were just like, scrap it. This is not going to be a moneymaker
Yeah.
for us. Get out. But like, you don't do that if you're going to start a story that really. Like, I read that this was a 2-volume story. Like, this arc was going to be 2 volumes, and then probably would go on from there.
Yeah.
And so this really is just half of it.
You know how when you're putting on a play
I do, yeah.
and you have to pay the licensing based on how many seats are in the theater,
Yeah.
regardless of how many people show up.
Right, yeah.
It's probably that kind of
Yeah.
thing where like they have to pay
Marvel.
a certain
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah.
And if they really don't think anyone or enough people will buy it, then it's just a loss.
Yeah.
Like that costs them money.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the Marvel anime line was pretty successful for them, and they popped out several of those. But I can't think of a lot of like Marvel manga. I know DC has Batman and the Justice League, which is at least 3 volumes. I don't know how much farther it goes beyond that, but I don't know that Marvel's really like dipped its toe in this water since. There's probably something out there, but certainly nothing that's sort of risen to the level of mainstream.
Yeah, nothing I can think of.
And I think this just hangs on because of Raina Telgemeier's like after the fact, after this came out, became such a big name in like this age geared graphic novels,
I wonder what she thinks about it.
I don't know. I mean, she got paid, but I think it would still be frustrating to never have the story resolve.
Yeah.
But I'm always curious about this kind of little like this little cul-de-sac, that never gets finished, because I think I liked it more than you, and I would have read volume 2 based on this. Would you?
You don't care as much about X-Men as I do, and you don't care about manga as much as I do.
Definitely true.
And so I think that it was probably easier for you to just be like, tra-la-la-la-la,
Yeah.
and I was just like, no, this is wrong
Okay.
in so many ways.
Okay.
So that's probably what happened,
All right.
is what I
All right. Well,
expect.
let's go.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the characters we've got in this little book, it stars Kitty Pryde, which a few years ago I would have been like, Kitty, meh, but now I'm kind of into Kitty,
Okay.
so that's fine.
All right.
Then there's Pyro and Iceman and Havoc and Blob. And the interesting thing about this book is that it's in a universe where the Xavier School has Xavier and Magneto.
Right.
And then all the kids are like Brotherhood kids and X-Men kids. And
Right.
they're all just going together.
Yeah.
And it's like we don't really know that they're bad guys yet.
I mean, they're called the Hellfire Club, which is probably not a great look.
Which is also not... That's
Yeah,
fine.
they're not the Hellfire Club.
They're not the Hellfire Club.
Yeah, it's
but
weird.
anyway, it starts with Kitty being a mutant, but not really knowing anything about mutantdom or anything.
Yeah.
Mutants appear to be familiar enough to people around her that they'll be like, she's a mutant, and like freak out about it, but they think it's contagious and all this stuff. So they don't really get it. But anyway, Kitty is all dolled up in typical shoujo fashion. Very androgynous.
They're all very androgynous. I had some trouble just in general. Like, I was like, wait, who is this?
Yeah.
And they don't always say either. Like, I think they just take for granted that you're going to know. But a lot of times I was like, he's wearing a black shirt, so it's probably Havoc.
Yeah, and there was
I wouldn't put money on it.
Cyclops had these dark glasses, like dark sunglasses.
Yeah.
But then someone else also had dark
Pyro
sunglasses.
had dark sunglasses.
And so every time I saw, I was
know.
like, which one?
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, not enough. I mean, Angel has giant wings. So that one I got.
That was Angel.
That one I knew.
Oh, Angel's in it as well. I didn't say
Yeah, he
that.
doesn't play a major role, but he's there.
Yeah. So anyway, Kitty is being a high school girl who doesn't know how she can fit in,
Right.
and then like she's starting to have these
Her
incidents with her powers.
Her mutantness is becoming a bit of a problem.
Yes. And so she comes home one day and she goes to the restaurant where her family runs a restaurant.
Does Kitty have sisters in the comic?
I honestly, I don't know enough about Kitty, but I was
Okay.
surprised to see them.
Yeah.
So I can't say no, she definitely doesn't,
Right.
but
I've never
thing I
come
know
across
about
that before,
Kitty.
but okay.
But so, yeah, she comes home to the restaurant. She has two sisters who are telling her that her parents need to see her, and she doesn't know why. So she goes home. And when she gets there, Magneto is there.
And they say that he was a friend of Kitty's grandpa. So he's like this family friend from like generations past.
Which I don't know what the point is of that.
No, but I feel like it probably would have come out later on as Magneto's clearly kind of grooming her to be part of his little sect, you know.
You think it's Magneto doing that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, anyway, so yeah, he shows up and he's there on behalf of the Xavier School.
Yes.
And is like, hey, so these like issues your parents are telling me about. And Kitty's embarrassed because I guess it's sort of like an open secret in her family.
Right.
Like she has these problems, but she's like, oh, I guess we're just like telling strangers about this now. Great. That little hiccup aside, she pretty smoothly just like goes to the school. She's excited because it's a big fancy like private school. And I didn't ever think I'd be able to afford such a place. And she's very excited. She gets there, and it turns out she is the only girl.
The only girl who's a student. There's faculty members, obviously, but she is the only girl, which...
So you're telling me, first of all,
Yeah.
that Xavier,
Yeah.
when recruiting these mutant kids, is like, I think it's fine to just have a bunch of guys and then this one girl and just like throw her into the situation with no one addresses it.
And
she just is the only girl and no one's like, well, don't worry because blah blah blah.
And it's like a boarding school too.
Yes.
And I think
she has an entire wing to herself until like if they happen to like get more girls and this is just fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
She's just going to be isolated.
And I think it's just Storm, right? Isn't Storm the only faculty member?
Yeah, Storm is a faculty member.
They mentioned Jean, but she's like away.
She's away doing something, which maybe we would have figured out.
I think we would have
in the second
volume 2.
But yeah, so already, I mean, it's just.
You're not liking it. It's not
I'm not. Like, first of all, that is dumb.
Yeah.
It's a dumb concept that would ever happen.
Yeah.
And also, it just immediately is all these, like, weird, ethereally beautiful young men just, like, traipsing around and being like, oh, a girl. And, like, they're all in love with her immediately.
Of course, they have to be. Yeah, so she talks to Xavier. She meets Kurt. Just a little interaction. She's like, whoa, this guy's weird.
Well, she doesn't initially she doesn't meet him. She just sees him and judges him by his ankles.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
And that reminds me, the character designs are interesting in this because they're all like Kurt and they show Beast and like the people who have kind of like more visible mutations. it's all a take
Yeah.
on those, which I think is interesting.
Oh.
Did you not get that? Was
That's
Beast?
Beast.
That was Beast.
With the little tie.
Yeah.
He just looks like a grizzly bear.
Yeah, that was Beast.
Oh, okay.
So they have Kurt,
Yeah.
who is like scalier than
Yeah,
you
he is.
usually see him,
Yep.
less with the fur, and he's got kind of like claws, like
Yeah.
like falcony
Yeah.
claws
Yeah.
kind of a situation. So like there's little takes on that, and yeah, Beast looks basically like an anime bear,
Okay.
you know, just
right.
like a cute anime bear.
Well,
Beast.
later when we see Colossus in like full power form, he looks just like. Do you remember Return to Oz, or have you blocked this out of your mind?
I remember that Return to Oz happened and tormented
It's
me.
terrifying. There's a character named TikTok in that, and he looks exactly like TikTok.
That's
so
funny.
Somebody's doing something. Like
Yeah,
either
maybe she is.
Either TikTok is a reference, or this is a reference to TikTok, because it's too close.
That's very
it's
funny.
It's too close.
That's very funny. Okay, so anyway, where was I?
Yes, well, Xavier's kind of like, oh, yeah, Bobby, why don't you show her around? And he's like
Yes,
mean
okay.
and cold and
So,
tortured.
When she first shows up, as I said, all of the beautiful boys are falling all over themselves for her. But then she comes across Bobby.
Oh.
And Bobby is not interested in her. And so who knows what's going to happen with that, Nick?
Right.
Who knows?
I don't know.
First of all, dumb trope.
Uh-huh.
Very obvious. Second of all, Bobby? They're having Bobby be the weird standoffish
I know,
guy?
that is definitely a weird choice based on that character.
Like, Kitty so far is fine.
Yeah.
Like, Kitty as an adult gets interesting, but
Yeah.
she is a pretty flighty, like, whatever kind of a teenage girl,
Yeah.
so fine. But Kurt is standoffish.
Yeah.
Not really, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that's not Kurt. That's
Right.
not what Kurt is like, but
Right.
he's standoffish for whatever reason. And now Bobby,
Yeah.
who's just like, "Meh, whatever. meh."
I don't know if it's to like kind of force her into like to set up the Hellfire Club as like the accepting ones, but they never quite give us a reason.
Well, see, that's my problem with it, because I don't like when authors write the story they want to write and then just plug in characters
Yeah.
to serve the purpose, because it's very clear that, I mean, that you're exactly right. Like, she needed a bunch of guys who were bad but very easy to get to know.
Right.
One guy who's gonna be the good guy, but he's standoffish and she thinks he hates her.
Right.
You know, these
They
are all
need it.
people that need
Yep.
to exist. But, like, you know, there are people that you could put in those positions that would make sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bobby has to show her around the place.
Yeah.
And he walks very fast. And she, you know, sort of trips over herself and is like, "Oh, where'd he go?" Ah. And it's just very tropey. But so he's the one who tells her she's the only girl.
Yep.
She has to go to the danger room for some reason.
Well, like Warren meets her and he's all like, "Oh, hello." He's like dripping with sex.
crazy.
He is. And
He's like glowing and like floating in
know.
the air.
He invites her
completely
to the danger room. He's like,
shirtless.
"Come, I'll show you around the danger room after school." That's how she
But
ends up in the
like,
danger room.
he sort of like creeps up behind her
Yeah,
and it's
he's-
just like,
no, he's
"Come to the
creepy.
danger room," and
He's
she's like,
creepy,
"Okay."
yeah.
But she goes, and when she gets there, Forge has created like a hologram
Yeah.
of what is like a beach
Yeah.
or something like
It was very
that.
Star Trek-y. Like the holodeck
Yeah,
in Star Trek.
this version of the danger room is a holodeck
Yeah,
version
for
of
sure,
the danger room,
for
not
sure.
no hardware of any kind. But yeah, Forge is in this Hellfire Club, so it's all of these beautiful men again, and
Yes.
they're all, you know,
Just mooning over her.
just mooning over her,
Yeah.
but also sort of like condescending.
Yeah.
like they're like, "Oh, she's a girl, she'll do."
Yeah, we'll let the girl
Whatever.
in. There's a quick scene before we get to the danger room where we run into Scott with his dark glasses, and he and Havoc get into it and have a very, very tense relationship. Just boom, quick scene, and we don't
Yeah.
find out until much later about, like, Kitty doesn't find out that they're brothers until much later in the story.
Yeah. So anyway, they show her, they're like, "We're the Hellfire Club and we're awesome," and
Yep.
we find out that Magneto gives them all kinds of perks.
Right. This is why I think Magneto is the one who's sort of turning the gears and trying to get Kitty and
Could be.
others in there. But basically, they're like, "Hey, you're a member of the club, sis," and
And she's just
that's it.
fine. She's fine with that.
She's gonna do it. Time is kind of meaningless in this. Like, as the relationships progress and everything, We start at the beginning of the year and we end with her going home for Hanukkah. But the story itself feels like it happens in like an afternoon. So it's a little tricky to follow.
There's something about the pacing that does make it feel very like this
immediate.
Has been a tiny short amount of time. But time has passed apparently. And she's joined this group of people. And we sort of see little snippets of classroom moments where like Pyro gets in trouble. And like you just sort of get the idea that these Hellfire Club people are like the bad kids.
Right.
But like Magneto gives them privileges, and so they don't really get in trouble.
They're sort of untouchable in that way.
Yes.
Yep. So that's chapter 1. So then we roll into chapter 2.
1.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, Kitty has class with Storm.
Yeah.
And thinks she's awesome. She's got the mohawk and everything.
Yeah, it's a good look for Storm.
Yeah. Storm doesn't have very much, if anything, to do. She just sort of is there.
No, I mean, she's just one of the adults. That's her role. She's just one of the adults.
Yeah.
So
after that, Kitty goes to lunch. She tries to sit with Fred, I think, Blob, and then like someone comes up and is like, "You idiot, you can't sit with him. He's a loser," or whatever. And so, which is interesting because Blob is in the Brotherhood,
right?
But he's not
in the Hellfire.
One of these kids who's whatever.
She gets whisked away to the swankiest lunch place because Magneto has this special thing, and it's all like caviar and just this really extravagant meal. And Sabretooth is there with a collar.
Sabretooth is like a weird, like, slave, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because he's got chains.
Yeah.
And they're like telling him
he's like on a leash.
Yeah. And they're telling him to like make sure you're polite to the guest and all this stuff. And it's creepy.
Yep.
But anyway, so she has this crazy dinner, lunch thing.
This whole time, Warren has been the one who's like aggressively pursuing her. Like when she first gets into the danger room in the beginning, he's like, "So are we dating? Is this like happening?" And she's like, "What?"
Yeah.
You know, so that keeps happening over and over again.
But then what ends up happening is that Pyro, does he ask her out or did they just start dating?
It just kind of happened. Yeah, it just kind of happened.
She's
like,
dating Pyro now for some reason.
Warren goes and takes her flying. He comes to her window and takes her flying.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And at first she's like, "Oh, cool," but then she's like huddled on the ground, freezing.
Yeah,
and
well, she's scared
Pyro
of.
comes up and he's all warm.
Yeah, Kitty's freaked out by like being on the second floor or any heights kind of a thing because she thinks she'll just slip through because she does not have control over her powers.
Yes.
Did Kurt say his powers were girly at some point?
I think it was Havoc told Kitty that she has a nice girly power.
Yeah, but Kurt too.
Oh, that's true.
He said it wasn't as...
Yeah, because they have sort of passive powers that they weren't as like...
Yeah, which I just thought was...
whatever.
I thought it was such a strange... I don't know, I'm trying to remember 2009, but it was just such a weird... Yeah, like they talked about her power in a very sexualized way, like sex roles kind of way.
Right.
That I think was, supposed to be condescending.
It was, definitely.
But then when Kurt talks about his powers, and he's talked about it being so... Kurt's powers are awesome. Like, I don't even know what's happening.
Well, I think it's because, like, everybody else, for the most part, not Angel, but most of the people have sort of a projectile, like,
I guess,
explodey kind of power. And whereas Kitty and Kurt have,
Yeah.
So
I guess it feels to me like the only people we see in this school are a bunch of terrible people.
True.
Who are the Hellfire Club people. And Forge is nice, I guess, for some reason.
Yes, but also in the Hellfire Club.
Pyro
gets jealous of that because he's nice to her.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then there's like a mildly homophobic moment because like she's sitting next to Pyro. No, she's sitting next to Forge and Pyro gets jealous and Forge kind of jokes that like he's jealous because...
Oh, okay.
Because Forge is paying attention to her instead of to him.
Uh-huh.
And then Pyro's like, "Ew, get away from me," and stuff. And it was a kind of like a weird little thing there.
All right. Well, we get a little more context in the school at this point. Xavier and Magneto go through the different mutant levels.
Which is another weird thing, because first of all, Epsilon Delta is the lowest one.
Yeah.
Do you know what the next level up is?
Beta. Right.
Then Alpha.
Yeah.
And Xavier and Magneto are like, we're alphas.
Yeah.
But then there's also Omega.
Right.
Which Xavier and Magneto are Omega level mutants.
Well, but they kind of make it seem like it's more about mastery and control of your powers and less about
Yeah, I just...
yeah, no, I know. I'm with you.
I guess I'm just continually struggling throughout this entire book with this weird disconnect from what anything really is like in the X-Men. And, like, I get doing a take on the X-Men. Mm-hmm. There are, like, a million different titles that are completely different universes and all this stuff. I get it. But it's, like, the closeness to what things actually are... It's like an uncanny valley situation where it's like we have these like alpha, beta, whatever levels and omega, but they're specifically not omega level, even though they are.
Like, in mainstream, yes.
It's just freaking me out.
I know. Well, the next thing they do is they're saying, like, you know, you guys need to get control of your powers, so, like, buddy up and practice your powers with another. This
Where's Gamma? Anyway.
I don't know. This is a thing that bothered me about this, though, because I felt like there's kind of an emptiness here, because sometimes it kind of feels like there are other students. We're just focusing on these. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's true. I think it's just like the 7 of these people in this big mansion.
And most of them
so
are terrible.
Weird. Yeah.
And the teachers apparently have no control over, like, the atmosphere, the environment of the school.
Yeah.
Because they just are all terrible and, like, manipulating Kitty and, like, being jerks to, like, 2 kids. It's like Scott's an outsider, Fred's an outsider, and I guess Iceman too, but he's sort of, like, above it all.
He's a sexy, cool outsider.
Yeah.
Don't we get Gambit? Do we get a little Gambit in there?
Yeah, there's a couple scenes with Gambit.
Yeah.
That I think, I mean, there just had to be a plan for him later.
Yeah.
But he was just sort of like a tease.
Yeah, right. So, they're testing their powers, and Kitty gets paired up with Kurt.
Yes, and Kurt is weirdly standoffish for Kurt, but then they get along eventually, and now they're friends. Pyro's not happy with that because he's a controlling boyfriend.
No.
And so he gets jealous and is a jerk.
There was a thing where they were using their powers, and Kitty was starting to freak out because she was trying to hold her phase, and she said she felt like she was falling away from herself and was like afraid.
That was interesting.
It was interesting.
That was interesting.
Like she was afraid she was going to get lost, like in the phase, and not be able to like.
But like sort of almost like she was in a different universe or something. It was an interesting thing, but it was like a completely insane thing because Magneto, and I guess it must just be because it's Magneto. But, like, the thing was that Magneto had Bobby make an ice block, and she had to phase into it to sort of see how cold affected her powers. Mm-hmm. Interesting. But she goes all the way in and is just inside this block for 5 minutes?
Something like that.
And she, like, passes out. And then, I think, is it Kurt who bamfs her out of there?
Yeah.
I don't know. That just seems like a crazy thing to put a child through.
I know. I know. I agree.
And I know we're talking
it's
X-Men.
It's Magneto, but yeah.
We're talking X-Men. They always do crazy things to put children through, but that was a lot for me. But yeah, she does seem to be sort of having kind of a weird... When she pushes her powers, things seem to be happening.
And I think she feels pressured to do so.
Yes. So meanwhile, Hellfire Club is still happening. They still seem to think that she's just completely on board. Yeah. She's starting to be a little like, maybe you guys are kind of jerks. But she's still kind of in with them. So they're hanging out with her, and they're like, no, do what we want to do. And she's like, I want to do what I want to do. She wants to study.
Right.
And they're like, forget that. We'll just pretend to study and get good grades. Whee! Yeah. And she's like, no thanks. So she uses her powers and sort of like climbs through the walls and like hides from them.
Which was cool. I liked that.
Yeah, that was fun.
Is this where she finds Gambit? Is it Gambit that's cooking?
I think it must be Gambit.
I think it is.
I didn't realize until I saw him again later, but I think that must have been Gambit. Because he does. Yeah, he says something in French.
Yeah.
He says something in French.
Yeah.
But, she slips into the kitchen, and Gambit's there making something.
Let's say gumbo.
Sure.
Let's just...
Maybe it's gumbo.
It probably is.
He looks nothing like Gambit.
No. He's wearing an Army Industrial shirt, which I don't understand. If that's supposed to be a reference, I don't get it.
Anyway, so she meets him. It's just sort of a in passing kind of a thing. Like, it's several pages.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have anything to do with the plot.
I think it is set up for future.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a thing that happens.
There's a big makeout montage here.
Oh, yeah. So Pyro and Kitty go up on the roof to ditch class, which she is now okay with.
Well, yeah, he comes and he's like, Professor Monroe, Xavier wants to see her right away. And so she leaves and he's like, psych.
Yeah.
And she's weird about it at first. Then they go up on the roof to
They go up on the roof and then they make out pretty hardcore. Yeah. And then she like phases them through the ceiling.
Right.
And they're fine. fall to the ground, but they're fine. And I thought this was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
But Pyro's just like, let's do it again.
Right.
He just thinks it's fun.
The end. It was weird place because she had just ditched the Hellfire Club and was feeling weird about it.
Specifically because they wanted her to ditch homework.
Right.
And so she's like, I take academics seriously.
But then he shows up and they just like make out through all the building and it's fine. It was really weird. That felt like out of nowhere to me. I didn't get that. But that's the end of chapter 2.
How many chapters are there?
3.
3 chapters. Okay, so we're on chapter 3. It's the last chapter. So Kitty is increasingly uncomfortable with the Hellfire Club. I think she's sort of starting to see the way that Magneto is sort of like letting them skate through and stuff, and she just doesn't like that kind of stuff. And they're all, I mean, they're not. She was uncomfortable in the very beginning. She was in a new place, and they were nice to her, fine. But they haven't changed the way they treat her.
No, they haven't.
They were creepy and controlling and condescending and jerks from the start.
True. And it's not like relationships have really developed here. She has a line where she says she's starting to feel like their exotic pet, like by being the new one and the only girl. And that's how they treat her.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
But anyway, she's starting to not like that.
Yeah.
Kitty is walking around and I don't think she has a meeting. She sort of like bumps into Xavier.
And she had been avoiding Xavier because he was pretty loose with reading her thoughts in their first meeting.
Yeah.
And loose and walking around the office.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
this is pre. No chair for him. So she's been avoiding him this whole time. And finally they kind of bump into each other and he's like, "Oh, join me for tea, you old Jew." And so they go and they have tea and he makes her feel better and he's nice. And she's like, "Why was I avoiding him?"
Yeah.
That able-bodied man.
I don't understand this school.
I don't understand it either.
Because, I mean, there was that whole presentation where Xavier and Magneto were like, here are the levels of mutant.
Right.
But they don't really seem... No, because Magneto teaches physics.
Right.
So they must be teachers. I guess it's just the things that we're looking at. It feels like the kids just run amok. Xavier hides in his office, and Magneto manipulates people.
The little snippets of class we see are not... I mean, some of them are, like the ice block one, but a lot of them, like Storm is teaching, like, I don't even remember what it was, like science, basically, and Magneto, is physics and stuff, so it's like they're taking real classes. It's not just, like, mutant classes, but the school doesn't make any sense, like, as a whole.
Yeah, and, like, Xavier is presented very, like, she ends up with a lot of confidence in him, and he is a very calming influence and stuff, but that is nowhere in the actual running of the school.
No, he seems very out of touch. He seems like up in his office
while
Magneto
chaos.
is sort of running the show.
Anyway, so she meets with him, she feels better, and then they're going to take a road trip. This feels to me like it was just like we're going to go and have fun.
Yeah.
Rather than like a field trip.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a day trip,
So they just, apparently, this is a thing they can do.
I guess.
They all get in, is it a bus?
Yeah.
They get in a bus, and who wants to come? Well, let's see. So Scott's coming, Pyro comes.
Bobby's already on the bus when she gets on.
Bobby's on the bus, and there's all this internal stuff with Kitty being like, I'm just gonna not even look at him. He doesn't deserve it, and all this stuff, which is...
Yeah.
Okay, anyway. Fred comes, right? Blob comes.
Yeah.
Who else is there? I mean, Havoc
it's the Hellfire Club, basically.
Are they all there?
Like, everybody's pretty much there. But
I'm, like, picturing the bus.
Yeah, Kitty sits by herself, and then Fred comes up and is like, "Oh, can I sit here?" And she's like, "Oh, well, actually," because she's saving it for Pyro. He sits down, and then Pyro comes and really, like, is cruel. Is like, "You fat tub of lard. Like, get out of here. You're awful and ugly, and we all hate you." You know, it's rough. And she's like, "Hey, Fred's nice." And he's like, "Whatever." And then it's fine, I guess.
Yeah, she like mildly stands up for him, but then is still his girlfriend.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so they drive into the city. Kitty is very excited. They're walking around. There seems to be some sort of, like, they're in a museum for a while, and it seems like there's some sort of kind of academic element to it.
I think there's an agenda, but Pyro is like, "Let's ditch this." And so they, like, get on the subway and they go out strolling. But there's a weird line where it's like everywhere they go, Scott and Fred are, like, already there. And I didn't know if they were setting up some sort of...
Yeah,
I don't know. It was something about that just caught my attention. But as they're wandering around, they come upon this anti-mutant protest.
Yes. And they decide to address the protests.
Yes.
Rather than just not do that.
Right.
But they go in and they're like, hey, mutants are fine or whatever. And then predictably, the anti-mutant people are like, mutants are terrible.
You're mutants.
For whatever reason, someone does something that uses their powers. And so they're like, they're mutants. Ah! And then all hell breaks loose.
Then it becomes a big thing. Yep.
The Hellfire Club people just take this as an opportunity to go nuts against these people, who, by the way, are humans. They're just humans.
Just people.
Just people with signs.
Scott, Bobby, and Fred kind of try to keep things going, but Havoc and Pyro are kind of like, well, look, we're already in this now. We're going to get in trouble, so let's just do it. Let's just do it.
They're like shooting blasts at these people, like freaking out.
Havoc kind of like rises and is like floating in the air, and his powers just go like bananas, and he seems kind of like in a trance. Not Havoc's kind of stuff, but like this is what's happening, and this has been kind of layered throughout that Havoc is a loose cannon. You know, like there's been lots of little things there, but this is like him going Omega, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what we're supposed to assume.
Right.
And, like, there's the stuff with Kitty, who was kind of pushing her powers, and maybe that was hinting at that kind of Omega level situation.
Right. I think Magneto definitely had her pegged as, like, potentially Omega.
So, like, that's in there, but it's not, I mean, it must just be, obviously, it would be coming out more in the second one.
Right.
But it just sort of is hinting. I felt like the rising up and all of that felt like it just happened completely spontaneously to me. Like, there was chaos happening, and then I turned a page, and then he was just, like, floating.
Right, yeah.
And they were like, oh.
That is how it feels. It, again, like the school, the whole problem here seems very small and contained. It seems like a few protesters and a few of them, but it just becomes this colossal thing where stuff's happening.
Someone runs and gets the grown-ups.
Yes.
And Storm and Colossus, who we hadn't seen before, shows up. They show up, and
Colossus goes all TikTok.
He goes all
little
TikTok.
metal, round, rotund little body.
Yep. And then the professor is like en route, like he's thinking to them and stuff, and he's like, I'm almost there and everything, because then I guess he'll just solve the problem.
Right.
So Havoc's freaking out, and he like blasts something, like a building or like a statue or something, and like things happen. This was another thing that was like a turn the page and something has happened.
I had to go back and be like, oh, Xavier's there.
Right.
Oh, like,
So what ends up having happened is that Havoc knocked over some like crazy rubble something, and it landed on Xavier.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, this is the thing that makes him be in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And that's like the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So they're all just there in this scene with like rubble everywhere. And what happens with Havoc?
So, yeah, I mean, it essentially ends with Xavier being trapped under there, and it's like, oh, no. Then we get a little epilogue where they explain that, you know, Xavier and Havoc are still in the hospital, but it's looking like they're going to survive, and nobody knows anything beyond that. There's an assembly, and Beast, who I've learned it is Beast, is like, we're just gonna call it a holiday break, because we're already in winter at this point. He's like, we're just gonna call this a holiday break. You guys can just go home. Maybe don't talk about this so much.
Yeah.
And come back next year and next semester, and we'll pick it up from there, everybody.
Yeah, the way he says that, like, don't talk about it, really felt like they were gonna like go to the press or something. It's just like, let's keep this on the DL.
Right.
So yeah, they all go home, and Kitty is surprisingly upbeat.
Yeah.
She's like, I get to go home for the holidays. Whee!
Yeah, she's very excited to go home for Hanukkah. Food, presents, singing, the works. Mm-hmm. But she is also kind of reflective about what happened and is like, I was afraid of them. When all this happened, I was afraid of what they were going to do. And she and Pyro are like through, but that's sort of just there. Like, it's not, we don't really get like a breakup scene.
She sort of like walked away from him, I feel like, at the end of the events.
And I guess that's supposed to be
But because then, she calls him her ex or something like that.
She does. But what's the big tease, Hilary?
But then she's in the car, and then...
Oh, we missed a crucial part. In the fight, when everything's going down, she looks over and all this rubble is falling, and she locks eyes with Bobby. Remember? She locks eyes with Bobby, and he's like, ah. And so she runs over and grabs him, and they, like, phase together.
Yeah, she phases him and
then they
saves
pull
him.
apart, and they have this, like, deep, meaningful eye contact, and then that's it. And then we jump to the epilogue here. So with that in mind, she's in her car going home, and Hilary, what's in that car?
There's a cooler, and
A
there's
cooler, an igloo cooler.
She opens it, and there's an ice heart inside of it, which to me is quite an escalation from never speaking to someone.
Right.
To give them a heart.
Made of ice. In a cooler. He had to find a cooler.
It's not a rose.
Right.
It's not, you know what I mean?
He gave her his heart.
Do you think it's his real heart?
Might be.
He just took it out.
Might
in
be Iceman.
form.
Omega level.
Omega level. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying.
I know, it's weird.
Anyway.
It's weird. So that's it. I mean, that's the tease. She's going to go home. That's first semester is the first book. I had a physical copy of this book, Hilary, and the last page here says preview of volume 2, and I would like to read this for you. This is what might have been in volume 2. It's not easy starting a new school year, especially when you're a student at Xavier School, and Kitty Pryde is starting the semester with classic first day jitters. Will the place be the same without Professor X? She's been thinking about Iceman all summer, but has he been thinking about her? And she's so not looking forward to running into her hot-headed ex, Pyro, and his buddies in the Hellfire Club. But this year, boys will be the least of Kitty's troubles, because Kitty's no longer the only girl at Professor X's academy. Between sharing the boys of Xavier's school with the new girls and an action-packed school tournament with an obstacle course, a fashion show, and a cooking showdown.
This was so enough for me.
It's gonna be one crazy semester.
No, thank you. So what'd you think about this book, Nick?
I guess I still kind of like it.
Really?
I mean,
I got like 10 pages in, and I was like, I hate this.
Yeah.
I hate this. And then I was like, I'm going to give it a shot, and I kept going, and I finished it, and I was like, I hated that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you said, like off the get-go, like manga is not a format that I tend to read, so I don't have a lot of attachment to it. I still like, as we go through it and as I read it for a second time, I was like, oh, this is kind of clunky.
Yeah.
But my initial reaction was like, okay, weird spin on the X-Men. Let's do it. Let's see volume 2. And I still, like, I'm not saying that if this continued and there was like 30 volumes of this, I wouldn't be down for that. But I would pick up volume 2 after reading that. But I sense that you wouldn't.
I just get very impatient. I get impatient with the shoujo style to begin with.
Okay.
And something that's like deliberately approximating the shoujo style is just too far gone for me. Like, the reason that I enjoy any given shoujo manga or anime is always in spite of the typical elements.
Yeah.
Like, you just sort of accept those things.
Right.
And then you're like, but I love this character. I love this relationship. I love this plot line. You just move on through it. When someone is making something trying to be in a particular style, those elements become more of the forefront.
Right.
And
because they're
harder to avoid.
shoehorning people into the roles that they need for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the just the little like style elements.
Yeah.
That in a real manga are style elements.
Right.
And in this end up being just much more front loaded.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to be something rather than just trying to tell a story in a style that is familiar to you.
It's interesting to me that they chose Kitty because I feel like, and maybe that's partly because of the X-Men. Like, by the time Last Stand came around, they were trying to kind of make Kitty Pryde a thing. I don't know. But it just seems like with the tropes and stuff at play here, like, wouldn't Rogue and her whole I can't touch anybody be a better choice?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to know because all of the characters are in roles that aren't natural to them. Right. So it's hard to know who should be what.
Yeah.
In any of this.
Kitty, I mean, you're right. From the stuff that I've read of Kitty when she's like that age, like classic stuff, she's kind of just like, all right, like happy-go-lucky and rolling into things. This is like
X-Men Evolution Kitty.
Yeah. Yeah. She seemed fine to me. And I guess Magneto seemed pretty much how I would expect a Magneto
Except how like weird and suave and like loomy he was.
But I feel like outside of that, nobody really makes a ton of sense to me. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah.
Like Warren's always cocky, so there's that.
Yeah, that was fine, but like weird and over the top. I get because like he has that kind of like broody past.
Yeah.
of like before he kind of came into his own, and so they're just sort of like hanging out with that. There were things like that, but there were too many characters that were just completely opposite to what they usually are.
Yeah.
That it was weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm interested that Raina Telgemeier is now successful at graphic novels. Because I feel like the format was one of the biggest problems with this book, because there were things like we mentioned a couple times that just like suddenly were happening.
Right.
Because storytelling in a graphic novel format is very different than like writing a story.
Yeah.
And being able to lead the reader through exactly what's happening. This happens, then this happens, then this happens. In a graphic novel, you have to do different things to guide the reader that include the visual.
Yeah.
And I feel like this really failed at that.
Yeah, it did.
So you'd sort of think that it was like, she's really like a story writer, like a regular writer, and she tried this, but she's actually very successful with graphic novels.
So early in her career, though. And the stuff that really hit for her big, like Smile and Sisters, are autobiographical also. And they're stories about, like, you know, Smile is about, I'm pretty sure it's a girl who has to have like this like radical dental surgery. And Sisters is about, you know, just like hanging out with her sister. Those are the ones that really hit big. But it's a much more like, it's a younger age focus, and the style of those is a little bit more one-on-one. Like, here's me, this is what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Whereas this is such a huge group and such a huge like world to be trying to operate in, that it just, it didn't quite stick. Maybe you're talking me out of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd recommend it.
I wonder how she got tapped for this. Because like I didn't realize the timeline for her career, and I just sort of assumed that they were like, we want to do an X-Men manga. Who should we have do it? Oh, this person is successful. Let's have her do it.
And I don't remember the exact timeline in this, but she was working on a Babysitter's Club. They were adapting all the old books into graphic novels, and she wrote a lot of the early ones. And I feel like that's about this time. So it's probably that.
Okay.
It's probably that.
Because she was on the payroll.
Well, and it's like you're adapting from another medium into this format, and like she's had success with that. That's what I think. But I'd have to go and look at the actual dates on that, but that's what I think.
Okay.
So you're just like, this is just a no for you. Not even a fun little like what if kind of story.
It's really not.
All right.
It's not.
That's all right.
I'm very sorry to say.
Yeah.
Like, I understand what you're saying as far as like, if it was a standalone, it's easy to read that kind of thing and just be like, whatever. Like, I'm fine with takes. I mean, I said this already. Takes on the X-Men.
Yeah.
Fine. But this just failed for me.
Okay.
Completely.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me along on this journey.
Yes. Well, sadly, this one was a miss.
Okay.
But we got it under our belts.
I do really like Ghosts by Raina Telgemeier.
Okay.
So if you're interested in her, maybe that's a way to try it.
I'm like completely trashing this book, but I fully believe that Raina Telgemeier is a very good author.
I don't really think this is her fault. I think she's... she and the co-author on this, Dave Roman, I think are operating under a very clear set of guidelines and rules. So, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
But Ghosts is good. I'm just saying, if you're interested in reading more, I would say read Ghosts.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, that's it for this episode. Next time, we're back to the animated series with the Dark Phoenix Saga.
I am living for you guys to do these episodes, because I remember watching these in the 90s being like, why is everybody dressed in Victorian garb? What is this?
This is when we see the real Hellfire Club.
I had no idea. I really think this was my hopping off point. I watched this and I was like, I have been faithfully watching this show and I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, well,
so
that's
see.
Fair.
We'll see how it goes this time.
Yeah.
I'm interested to find out.
You'll get all the information.
I will.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me.
Yes.
And thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Previously on X-Men is brought to you by the Radio Meanwhile Network. Other shows on the network include 90s Music Got Me Like, This Endurian Life, and 9021 Here We Go. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Previously on X. See you next time.
Bye.